I never expected to be humiliated at my own brother's wedding reception. The day was perfect warm Arizona sun shining over a luxurious golf course in Scottsdale, guests laughing and raising glasses to celebrate. Then my brother Ian stepped up, wrapped an arm around me in front of everyone, and said with a big grin, "This is Rhonda, my little sister, still just an office worker. Nothing impressive in terms of position or anything." Polite chuckles spread through the crowd. A few sympathetic smiles like that explained everything about me. But his new wife Camden didn't join in the laughter. She looked at me more carefully, studying my face as if something didn't quite add up, then asked directly, "So, what do you actually do?" I set my champagne down, met her gaze, and answered with just one word. The room froze. No more clinking glasses, no background chatter. Every eye turned to me. My parents went pale, their expressions shifting in a way I'd never seen before. And Camden, her eyes widened slightly, a flash of recognition crossing her face that made it clear she knew exactly who I was. My name is Rhonda Bennett. For years, my family has loved simple labels, the kind that fit neatly into conversations without raising questions. Ian always got the glowing ones. Me, I got office worker. Short, harmless, and something no one ever pushed back on. I'd learned to stay quiet to let them keep their comfortable version of me. It kept the peace. But that single word I spoke changed everything. Not with drama or shouting, just quietly, instantly. And once it was out, there was no going back. If you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should know you best, or hidden part of yourself to avoid making waves, this story might feel familiar. Stay with me until the end, and if it hits home, drop your own experience in the comments below. Looking back, the pattern started long before any of us realized it would define everything. Ian has always been the sun our family orbited around. From elementary school honor rolls to making varsity football in high school, every milestone came with framed certificates on the living room wall and long stories at dinner about how proud Mom and Dad were. When he graduated from the University of Michigan with a finance degree and landed a spot at one of the big investment banks in New York, the celebration lasted an entire weekend. There were toasts, speeches, even a custom cake shaped like the Wall Street Bull. His promotions were announced like national holidays. Every bonus, every closed deal, every new title, vice president by 29, managing director before 35, was treated as proof that the Bennetts had done something right. I took a different path, one that didn't come with applause at the dinner table. While Ian was closing multi-million-dollar M&A transactions on the East Coast, I was still in California finishing my computer science degree at Stanford. The idea hit me during senior year, an AI-driven platform that could predict customer behavior for e-commerce brands with scary accuracy. I built the first prototype in my dorm running servers off a credit card and a lot of caffeine. A professor introduced me to an angel investor in Palo Alto. 6 months after graduation, we closed a $1.8 million seed round. I was 24. Series A followed 18 months later, $12 million, from 2 top-tier Sand Hill Road firms. The term sheet arrived the same week Ian got engaged, the first time a relationship that lasted 11 months. I flew home for the engagement party, excited to share the news. At the restaurant, I waited for a lull in the conversation, then mentioned the funding. Mom smiled politely, said, "That's nice, honey," and immediately turned to Ian to ask about his new apartment on the Upper East Side. Dad raised his glass to my brother's upcoming Hampton share house. The subject changed before the entrees arrived. I told myself it didn't matter. Series B came 2 years later, $45 million, led by a legendary Valley fund. The valuation crossed 9 figures. Forbes ran a short profile, 30 under 30. Rhonda Bennett is quietly rewriting enterprise AI. I sent the link to the family group chat. Dad replied with a thumbs up emoji. Mom asked if I was eating enough vegetables. Ian sent a meme of SpongeBob holding a tiny briefcase that read, "When your sister says she got funded again." I stopped trying to explain after that. Instead, whenever anyone asked what I did, I gave them the answer they clearly preferred. Just office stuff. Nothing exciting. It was easier. It kept the table calm. It let Ian keep shining without competition. I convinced myself silence was kindness. There were moments when the weight of it pressed harder. Thanksgiving, the year we went public, our IPO raised $230 million on the first day I flew in from San Francisco. The stock ticker was on every financial channel. I walked into my parents' house in Phoenix, suitcase still in hand, and Mom handed me a stack of plates to set the table. Ian was recounting how he had just closed the biggest deal of his career. Everyone leaned in. I opened my mouth to mention the bell-ringing ceremony at NASDAQ, then caught Dad's expression, pure, uncomplicated pride directed only at his son, and closed it again. I set the table. I passed the gravy. I smiled when Ian joked that at least one of their kids had a real job with predictable hours. By then, I had learned the rhythm perfectly. Ian spoke. The room listened. I spoke, phones came out. So I stopped speaking. It wasn't anger. Anger would have been cleaner. It was exhaustion, the slow, quiet kind that settles in when you realize your biggest achievements make the people you love most uncomfortable. I told myself their approval wasn't oxygen. My company was growing, the team was incredible, the technology was changing industries. That should be enough. And for a long time, I almost believed it was. Not everyone in my life bought the simplified version I gave my family. Spencer, my cousin, on my mom's side, was the only relative who ever saw through it. We grew up close, same age difference as siblings, but without the direct competition, and she noticed the signs early. The constant phone buzz at family gatherings, the way I'd step outside to take calls that clearly weren't casual, the exhaustion in my eyes after cross-country red-eyes from San Francisco back to Phoenix. She never pushed in front of others, but in private texts or quick moments alone, she'd check in. "You don't have to hide it from me," she wrote once after spotting a TechCrunch notification on my lock screen. Her advice was always gentle, protective. Keep the peace, especially with Ian's wedding coming up. They're not ready to hear it, and it'll just create tension no one needs on a day like that. She worried about backlash, about how my parents might feel overshadowed again. Spencer believed family harmony mattered more than individual spotlight, and her quiet support felt like permission to stay small, at least around them. Kendall saw it completely differently. We met freshman year at Stanford, bonded over late-night coding sessions, and shared dreams of building something real. She was there the night I sketched the first algorithm on a napkin in the dining hall there, when we incorporated in a tiny apartment above a garage in Mountain View. Kendall became my first hire, then my confidant through every funding round and crisis. She knew the boardroom battles, the investor pressures, the thrill of watching our platform scale to millions of users, and she hated the version of me that showed up at family events. "You're letting them define you," she'd say on our weekly video calls from her office in Seattle, where she now ran product for a major tech firm. "They get the watered-down story while the rest of the world sees the real Rhonda, the one on stage at conferences, the one closing 9-figure deals. It's not fair to you." Kendall pushed hard, tell them, force them to acknowledge it, stop shrinking to fit their comfort zone. Her frustration came from love. She wanted me to feel as proud in front of my parents as I did in front of strangers who understood what I'd built. Their opposing views pulled me in different directions for years. With Spencer, conversations happened in stolen moments, a quick hug in the hallway at holiday parties, her hand slipping into mine under the table when Ian dominated yet another story. She'd whisper reminders that some things were better left unsaid if they only caused pain. Her perspective felt safe, familiar, like choosing the path of least resistance to protect the family unit. Kendall's talks were marathon phone sessions, often late at night after I'd landed from another trip. She'd walk me through scenarios. What if I casually mentioned the latest acquisition over dessert? What if I invited them to the office holiday party in the Bay Area? She dissected every family interaction I described, pointing out patterns of dismissal I'd grown numb to. "They're not protecting you. They're protecting their image of you," she argued. Kendall believed truth, even uncomfortable, was the only way forward. The conflict between their advice became my constant internal debate. Some nights I'd draft texts to my parents, links to articles, photos from events, then delete them after reading Spencer's latest message about keeping things smooth for the wedding. Other times, fired up after a call with Kendall, I'd rehearse speeches in my head, imagining the satisfaction of finally being seen. The push-pull exhausted me more than any board meeting ever could. I valued Spencer's loyalty to family tradition. I craved Kendall's insistence on authenticity. In the end, I sided with caution. The wedding was approaching, emotions would run high, and the last thing anyone needed was disruption. Yet their differences strengthened me in ways I didn't expect. Spencer taught me patience and empathy for people stuck in old roles. Kendall reminded me of my worth outside those roles. Together, they formed the support system that let me keep going without completely breaking. I leaned on their texts during lonely flights, their voices when doubt crept in. And as Ian's big day grew closer, I decided the secret would stay buried a little longer, at least until the celebration ended. If you've ever been misunderstood by your own family about your success, or found yourself torn between staying quiet and finally speaking up, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below. I read every one. The wedding day arrived bright and clear. The Scottsdale golf course transformed into something out of a magazine. White linens covered every table, fresh floral arrangements and soft pastels sat perfectly centered, and the natural light filtering through the palm trees gave the whole place an effortless elegance. Staff in crisp uniforms moved efficiently, setting out crystal glassware and adjusting chairs one last time. I showed up earlier than anyone else in the family, as always. Mom caught me at the entrance with a clipboard in hand, casually mentioning the guest list needed double-checking against the place cards. Dad pointed out the sound system for the ceremony might require a quick test. They didn't ask. Outright, it was just understood that I'd handle those details. Ian texted from the groom's suite. "Hey, can you make sure the playlist transitions are smooth for the processional?" No question about whether I'd just flown in from the Bay Area the night before, or if I wanted a moment to change out of travel clothes. I jumped in without hesitation. Moving between the event coordinator and the AV team, I spotted a microphone stand slightly off-center and fixed it, rearranged a few floral runners that were blocking sightlines, and confirmed the wireless mics had fresh batteries. Years of organizing company off-sites and investor dinners had made these things second nature. I noticed imbalances others missed. The coordinator thanked me more than once, assuming I was part of the planning team. Guests started arriving around noon, pulling up in luxury cars to the valet stand. Women in pastel dresses and men in light suits commented on how stunning the venue looked, how the desert backdrop made everything feel exclusive. Relatives I hadn't seen in years greeted me with quick hugs and the usual questions about office life, accepting my vague answers without follow-up. The ceremony area filled steadily, rows of white chairs facing a simple arch draped in greenery. I took my seat near the front but off to the side, smoothing my dress and watching the string quartet tune their instruments. Everything ran on schedule, the efficient in-position ushers guiding late arrivals quietly. Then the energy shifted. Ian appeared first at the head of the aisle, sharp in his tailored tux, waving to friends with that easy confidence he'd always had. Whispers and camera clicks followed him. Moments later, the music swelled and Camden entered on her father's arm. Her gown caught the light, perfectly simple yet elegant, with a long veil trailing behind. The crowd stood, phones raised to capture the moment. She smiled radiantly as she walked toward my brother, every step drawing more admiration. They exchanged bows under the arch, voices carrying clearly over the soft breeze. Rings slipped on fingers, the officiant pronounced them married, and the applause erupted as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. I clapped along with everyone else, feeling the familiar mix of happiness for them and detachment from the spotlight. The newlyweds recessed down the aisle to upbeat music guests, tossing flower petals in celebration. Photos began immediately, large group shots on the lawn, the wedding party against the mountain views, endless combinations with parents and close friends. I hung back, helping direct a few confused aunts to the right spot when needed. As the sun climbed higher, people migrated to the reception area nearby, where shaded tables awaited with chilled signature cocktails. The band started a light jazz set, and servers circulated with appetizers. Compliments flowed freely. The venue choice was genius. The weather couldn't be better. The couple looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. Ian and Camden made their entrance to cheers, cutting the cake early for photos before settling into the head table. I found my assigned seat toward the edge of the family section, champagne in hand, watching the room orbit around them exactly as expected. From my spot, the contrast hit harder than usual, the opulence of the setting the attention on my brother and his bride, and my own role blending seamlessly into the background, useful but unnoticed. The ceremony wrapped up smoothly, the newlyweds leading everyone to the reception area, just a short walk across the manicured lawn. A live jazz band played soft standards as guests mingled around high-top tables, and a generous buffet spread with stations for carved prime rib, fresh seafood, and colorful salads. Signature cocktails, something with citrus and herbs, flowed freely from the open bar, keeping the mood light and celebratory. Ian wasted no time pulling together groups for photos, his energy pulling people in like always. He gathered colleagues from the bank, first recounting recent wins, landing a major tech client out of San Francisco, structuring a complex merger that made headlines in the journal, numbers that impressed even the most jaded in the crowd. Laughter followed his stories, backs slapped, glasses raised in admiration. Camden stood beside him, beaming, adding graceful comments that kept the focus on her husband. Family photos came next. Mom and Dad flanked the couple, then aunts and uncles cycled through. When it was my turn to step in for a sibling shot, Ian kept his arm around my shoulders a little longer than necessary, turning to the small cluster of guests nearby with that familiar wide smile. "And this is Rhonda, my little sister, still loyal to her office job. Nothing too flashy to brag about there." The group chuckled politely, a few nodding as if that fit perfectly with what they knew. One of Ian's co-workers made a light remark about how everyone needs someone steady in the family. I forced a smile, the heat rising in my chest, familiar but sharper in this setting. Camden glanced over during the laughter, her eyes lingering on me a beat longer than before. She tilted her head slightly, polite curiosity in her expression, but didn't say anything right away. Ian quickly steered the conversation elsewhere, asking about honeymoon plans in Italy, describing the Amalfi Coast villa he'd booked and how it overlooked the sea. The group latched onto that, questions about itineraries, recommendations for restaurants, travel stories from past trips. The reception gained momentum. Toasts began informally, friends standing to share funny anecdotes from Ian's college days or Camden's grad school adventures. Glasses clinked repeatedly, the band shifting to more upbeat tunes that got people swaying. Relatives pulled out phones for candid shots, the dance floor starting to fill with early enthusiasts. I circulated a bit, exchanging small talk with cousins and old family friends. Most conversations stayed surface level, weather, the beautiful setup, quick updates on kids or jobs. When anyone asked what I was up to, I stuck to the script, busy with work, nothing new. They accepted it easily, moving on to compliment the food or ask about the couple's registry. Camden crossed my path a couple times during the afternoon. Once, while picking up appetizers, she smiled warmly and commented on how well everything had come together. Another time near the bar, she mentioned knowing a few people in tech from her startup days. Her gaze held a hint of question, like she was searching for a connection she couldn't quite place. I kept responses neutral, deflecting with questions about the wedding planning instead. Ian dominated the head table area, entertaining clusters of guests with more stories from the trading floor, high-stakes negotiations, last-minute saves that earned him partner track buzz. Each tale drew bigger reactions, the circle around him growing. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light over the coarse string lights flickering on as daylight faded. Speeches turned sentimental. Dad getting emotional about watching his son build a life, Mom tearing up over how perfect Camden was for him. Applause followed everyone, the energy warm and inclusive for everyone in the spotlight. I stayed on the periphery, sipping my drink, feeling the subtle sting of that earlier comment settle in. It wasn't new, but amplified here among people who only knew the version my family presented. Camden's occasional glances added a new layer. She seemed to sense something off, though no one else did. The afternoon wore on with dancing, starting in earnest laughter echoing across the grounds, the celebration building toward dinner. No one could have guessed what was coming next. Dinner service started as the band took a break. Servers placing the first course in front of each guest at the long tables arranged to maximize the stunning desert mountain views. Plates of seared scallops with citrus reduction arrived, the aroma mixing with the cooling evening air. Conversation flowed easily at first, forks clinking against china, compliments passed about the chef's choices. Ian stood again near the head of the main table, glass raised for one more informal toast. He thanked everyone for coming, spoke warmly about how Camden completed his life, then slipped in a light aside about family dynamics. How nice it was to have someone like his sister handling ordinary office duties while he chased the big deals. The comment landed softly, a few chuckles rippling down the table as an inside joke. Camden set her fork down, her attention fully on me now. She leaned forward slightly, voice calm but direct. "Rhonda, you said CEO earlier. What company exactly?" The question hung there, simple and unavoidable. I glanced around the table, once relatives, mid-bite friends, smiling expectantly, then answered evenly. "The AI company that acquired your startup 2 years ago." Her face changed instantly, color draining as recognition hit. She repeated the full company name slowly, as if testing it aloud. "The one that bought us out for $48 million with the earn-out clause tied to user growth milestones." A few heads turned, confusion starting to spread. Camden continued, voice steady but quieter. "I remember the final negotiation meeting in your San Francisco office. You pushed hard on the IP terms, wanted full control of the core algorithm we'd spent 3 years building. We walked out thinking we'd lost everything until the revised offer came in 2 days later with better protections for the team." Guests exchanged glances, forks, pausing. She kept going, piecing it together for the table. "Then your team pivoted, the product, integrated it with enterprise tools, scaled it globally. It's the reason our old platform is now in half the Fortune 500 dashboards. I followed the news. I just never connected Rhonda Bennett, Ian's sister, to the founder who outmaneuvered us." Silence fell heavy and complete. No one chewed. No one reached for water. The string lights overhead seemed louder in the sudden quiet. Mom's hand froze halfway to her, glass eyes wide as she stared at me. Dad's mouth opened slightly, then closed, his usual confident posture deflating. Relatives down the table shifted uncomfortably, napkins twisted in laps. Ian's smile faltered, his glass lowering slowly. Camden looked straight at me, not accusing, just stating facts. "You sat across from me in that boardroom. You were the one who decided our fate." The weight of years settled in that moment, the glossed-over stories, the deflected questions, the easy assumptions, all exposed in one quiet revelation. No one spoke. The desert breeze carried the faint sound of the band setting up again in the distance, but at our table, everything had stopped. The air felt thicker, charged with the realization that the version of me they'd all accepted wasn't just incomplete, it had never been true. Ian broke the silence first, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Come on, everyone, she's joking." Classic Rhonda humor. His voice carried too loud, too bright as he waved a hand dismissively. A couple of guests chuckled nervously, hoping for an out. When no one fully relaxed, his expression hardened just a fraction. Seriously though, why hold back all this time? You waited until my wedding day to drop this kind of convenient timing, if you ask me. The accusation landed sharply, heads turning between us. Camden stayed quiet beside him, her gaze steady on the tablecloth. She didn't defend, didn't contradict, just added one more detail in a measured tone. The due diligence process was intense. Your legal team went through every line of code we'd written. I remember the follow-up calls about valuation adjustments. Her words carried weight without volume, making the moment feel even more real. Mom set her napkin down carefully, brow furrowed. Wait, you're saying this is actually true? She looked at me, searching for confirmation, voice laced with disbelief. Dad leaned forward, glass forgotten in his hand. Those trips you took, always work conferences, that was for this company. I nodded once. The pieces started connecting for them visibly. Mom's eyes darted as memories surfaced, the times I'd excused myself from family dinners for urgent calls, the vague explanations about being on the road for meetings. Dad's face shifted from confusion to something closer to regret, his shoulders sagging slightly. We thought. We just assumed. He trailed off, unable to finish. No one filled the gap. Guests shifted in their seats, conversations dying completely. A server approached with the main course but hesitated, sensing the tension, and quietly retreated. Plates sat untouched, wine glasses no longer raised. Ian tried again, voice rising with frustration. Look, if this is real, great, congratulations. But pulling it out now in front of everyone. On my day, he glanced around for support, but eyes stayed down, forks idle. Camden placed a hand on the table, not quite touching his arm. The lack of backup from her seemed to hit him hardest. His cheeks flushed deeper, the forced smile gone entirely. He attempted one more recovery, something about family teasing being normal, but the words fell flat, met with awkward coughs and averted gazes. The heaviness spread down the table. Relatives who had laughed earlier now looked uncomfortable, trapped in a moment they hadn't signed up for. Whispers stayed trapped behind tight lips. The band in the distance played on, oblivious, their upbeat set contrasting painfully with the frozen mood. Ian pushed his chair back abruptly, the scrape loud in the quiet. He stood, reaching for Camden's hand. She rose without resistance, expression unreadable. They walked away from the table together. No excuses, no goodbyes, just steady steps toward the private patio area beyond the reception lights. The remaining guests watched them go, the silence stretching longer. Servers finally cleared plates in near silence, the dinner effectively over, far ahead of schedule. Chairs emptied slowly as people drifted toward safer conversations elsewhere on the grounds. At our table, Mom stared at her hands. Dad rubbed his temple, and the weight of missed opportunities hung thicker than the desert night air closing in. The reception ended quietly that night, guests slipping away earlier than planned. Back in my San Francisco apartment the next morning, my phone started lighting up. Missed calls from Mom and Dad, followed by texts that felt clumsy, even on-screen apologies for not asking more, for assuming too much, promises to talk whenever I was ready. I read them, felt the familiar pull of guilt mixed with exhaustion, and left them unanswered. Word traveled in overlapping circles. A mutual connection mentioned the evening to someone in Ian's professional network, a casual comment about family tension at the wedding. It wasn't gossip, just context. But in the world of high-stakes finance, reputation matters beyond balance sheets. One potential client, after hearing the story secondhand, decided to pause discussions on a major deal. They cited alignment issues, nothing explicit, but the message was clear: character counts when trust is involved. Ian lost the contract, a significant one that would have been a career highlight. Camden canceled their honeymoon plans shortly after. She confided in a close friend who later shared with Kendall that she needed space to think. It wasn't only about the dinner revelation. It forced her to reconsider patterns she'd overlooked before, the casual dismissals, the way Ian positioned himself above others, including family. The Amalfi Villa booking was refunded, the time off work repurposed for reflection instead of celebration. Spencer checked in regularly, her messages full of quiet solidarity. She understood the family side better than anyone, reminding me that boundaries weren't cruelty, they were survival. "You don't owe them immediate forgiveness," she wrote after I told her about blocking numbers. Kendall was more direct, celebrating the decision as long overdue freedom. "You finally stopped carrying their version of you. That's power." I made the break official. Blocked my parents' numbers, Ian's too. Declined invitations to the usual holiday gatherings that started arriving in emails. No dramatic announcements, just silence on my end. The first few weeks felt strange, like missing a limb I'd never realized was weighing me down. Then the strangeness faded. Work filled the space effortlessly. Board meetings, product launches, mentoring younger engineers, life in the Bay Area moved at its usual intense pace. Nights were mine again, without the mental rehearsal of how to downplay achievements for the next family call. The relief came gradually then, all at once. Mornings with coffee on my balcony, overlooking the city, no dread about upcoming obligations. Decisions made for me, not around others' comfort. The constant background hum of obligation quieted, replaced by a clarity I hadn't known I was missing. I used to believe staying quiet protected everyone, kept the family intact, avoided conflict, let Ian keep his shine. But silence only taught them how little of me they needed to see. It preserved their convenience, not our connection. Cutting ties wasn't easy, and it wasn't revenge. It was boundaries. It was choosing self-respect over forced harmony. And in doing so, I gave them the chance to face the consequences of years spent looking past me. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop shrinking to fit spaces that were never built for your full size. You don't owe anyone a smaller version of yourself, not family, not anyone. Real peace comes when you stop auditioning for people who never truly watch the performance.